This is an interview of a candidate for Bandon School Board conducted by the League of Women Voters of Coos County. All candidates were invited to participate. We are talking now with Jon Sullivan. Jon Sullivan is running for Bandon School Board, position 7. His opponent was also interviewed. Jon Sullivan is a graduate of San Diego State University who has worked for 2 decades as a financial advisor. He was a member of the Bandon School District's Budget Committee before joining the school board, and prior to that was treasurer of his school's Parent-Teacher Association. All right, number 1. Why are you running for school board?
Thanks. So I'm running for re-election to the school boards. I would say mainly because it's something I've been passionate about for quite some time. I have 2 daughters that attend the Bandon School Districts. And I would say a thing that has always been very important to me is to see that all of our neighbors get quality public education. That's always been a key tenet of the things that I believe in. Now that I've been in Bandon for several years, feeling like I can do my part to, keep the school district on a good path is something that's quite important to me. As y'all may be aware of, we have a number of, unique budget challenges that are going to come up over the next couple of years. And having somebody with the background that I do, I think could be really helpful. Been a financial advisor for 20 years, got a lot of experience dealing with budgets. Was a budget committee member prior to that. Also the PTA that I was treasurer of, we had a budget of $180,000 a year because we actually had to fully fund a couple of teacher positions at the district I went to since the school wasn't adequately funded. So, really do believe I both have a real interest in being part of the school district, and my skill set probably lends itself to being a good contributor as well.
What relevant skills and experience would you bring to the school board?
Thank you. Well, I think starting off with the background I have in my work life. As you mentioned at the top of the interview, I've been a financial advisor for 20 years. So really what I spend my time on Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, is helping people, save for retirements and then have a good dignified retirement once they've gotten into their working careers. I think that dovetails really nicely with being on the school board since, while dealing with budgets is certainly not the only thing that we deal with, keeping the district on good, sustainable footing is always something we have to focus on quite a bit with the possible changes to school funding that are on the horizon over the next couple of years. I think having somebody with, that really deep understanding of how we can best pay for the things that we need to make sure all of our kids get a good education is really, really important. I'll also refer to the time I spent as treasurer of my PTA. Again, I referenced this earlier, but our school was chronically underfunded. We had to be very careful and very precise in how we raised money every year because we had to fully fund 2 teacher salaries each year, or those teachers would have to be let go. I'm thankful to say we never had to do that while I was part of the PTA. And I think the background I have dealing with budgets as well as just the deep amount of care I have for ensuring that everybody gets good public education, makes me a really good fit here.
If elected, how much time would you invest in visiting the schools?
Thank you. So I'm happy to say that as a current member of the school boards, have already visited each school in our district once. Obviously plan on doing that again, before my term is up. I would say if I'm reelected, though, to the position that I'm in, definitely been my goal to visit each school at least twice a year. Gained a lot of really great, deeper insights in how each of the schools work on each of those site visits. One of the things I'll particularly mention is our high school has a really wonderful shop program in place. Metal shop, woodworking, several different trades that students can train for while they're in high school, and seeing firsthand what those students are able to do while they're high school students, and the base of skills they're able to build while they're still in high school, so they can, come out of high school having, really deep knowledge of how woodworking works or how welding or metal shop works. As 18-year-olds coming right out of high school, if going to college is not something that's on the table for them, it's a really great and powerful thing to be able to see firsthand.
In your role as a liaison between the community and the superintendent, how will you solicit and weigh input from teachers, parents, non-teaching staff, and students?
It's a great question. Well, I think I'm happy to report that just in the brief amount of time I've been on the school board, about a year at this point, already have a lot of support from existing staff members at the Bandon School District. Have a ton of support from the wonderful people who teach our kids every day. I would say I'm an open book, though. I'm always welcome to have discussions with anyone at any time. I live in Bandon, I work in Bandon, I'm here every day. So I'm always welcome to have any discussion with someone that's they're wanting to have relate any points. I'm in town Monday through Friday, and always welcome having feedback. Obviously, always encourage people to come to school board meetings as well to make their voice heard publicly at those meetings. But definitely can meet with people one-on-one as well.
What are the most pressing challenges facing the district, and how would you address them?
Great question. I would definitely start with some of the budgetary challenges that we face going forwards. A key thing that I've talked about a lot in my campaign already so far is when you just look at something like free meal funding. A lot of people may not know this, but about 70% of the students that are in our districts qualify for free meals. It's due to the fact that their family income limits, their family income is below the threshold at which a student would qualify for free meals. Now, one of the things I do love about how our district works is we're currently covering the cost of meals for every student that attends our school. So that means that regardless of how much money a kid's family makes, they can get meals any day that they come to school at no charge. The thing I would say to that, though, is that this is one of those things that's potentially on the chopping board, depending on what happens to funding at the state and federal levels. So that basically means is if that funding mechanism was to go away, we as a district would then have to decide, hey, is this something we want to prioritize moving forwards? Now, me personally, that's something I would always fight for, because in addition to just the basic human right of the fact that, a young child should be able to know that they're going to have a meal every day when they come to school, kids just do learn better. Every study that's been done on free meals has shown that people do better once they have a meal in their place. Thank you. The other thing that I'll mention as well is, so another thing for our at-risk students is we have something called Title I funding, where struggling students get intervention teachers that help them fill in some gaps if they're not at grade level. That funding is potential on the chopping block as well. So figuring out how we would fill in that gap if Title I funding was to go away, it's really important because we've made a lot of progress getting those kids up to grade level through intervention teachers. Thanks.
Okay. How would you prioritize limited funding in the current uncertain environment?
Prioritize limited funding. I think the first thing that I would say there is, obviously we're currently in negotiations with our teaching workforce. Their contract is coming up right now. And, I'd say a big thing that has been focused on is, frankly, is cost of living. The teachers in our district, unfortunately, earn less money than teachers in other Coos County school districts earn. And I do think a big priority that should be placed on this is making sure that our teachers are able to have a good, dignified, sustainable life. The majority of our teachers, despite working full-time as educators, tend to work second jobs. And that's really disappointing, given the fact that they have college degrees, they get post-grad certifications. Teaching is a full-time profession. Nobody should need to have a second job if they're doing this as their full-time job. This should be the only thing someone needs to do to make a decent life. That's something I think we should put a lot of focus on.
What steps do you think need to be taken to foster a safe environment conducive to learning in the schools?
I think the first thing I would say there is I think by and large our school district already does a very good job of that. Kids come to school, there's a good base of support that exists for students already. They have access to school therapists if something comes up. One of the things I do like that each of our schools has in place already is they have what's called an alternative learning center at each school. So what that is for is if a kid needs additional time for study that their teacher has carved out time for them, they can go to the alternative learning center to get a quiet environment to get studying done. There are potentially some disciplinary reasons why someone might go to the alternative learning center, but it's a great place where kids that need a lighter touch or a slightly different environment than what they're getting in a standard classroom setting can easily get that without fear of reprisal, without fear of getting made fun of by their peers or anything like that. So I think we already do a really good job there. I think generally speaking, one of the things that I want to make sure about is the people that work at our schools right now. Again, they're specialists in these fields. They get degrees in it. They know what needs to be done in order to set our kids up well for success. I think it's our job as a school board to give them the tools they need to do their jobs and let them do what is best for our kids.
Bandon schools show only 45% of students meeting grade expectations in math.
Mhm.
What should be done to improve this number?
Thanks. I think a big thing, and I alluded to this earlier with Title I funding and intervention teachers. I would prioritize intervention teachers as much as possible. For someone who's not aware of how that works, intervention teachers are made available for kids who are not achieving up to grade level. What that basically means is there's dedicated class time that's carved out for those students who get to spend basically extra time building extra reps in the subject that they're studying in. And typically the teachers who are intervention teachers aren't just, math, science, reading teachers that spend extra time on that subject. They are specially trained in what school intervention looks like. So we've made some good progress, I think, with how our math achievements have progressed with this intervention focus over the past couple of years. Realistically, it needs more work, but I would lean in fully to the intervention process and fully fund that section of our school to give it the necessary resource to continue on that process. I think it's the only way we'll get there.
What rights do parents have under Oregon law to direct their children's education? And what role should parents plan in shaping school policy?
I think the role that parents, in my view, should have in helping shape school policy is obviously we want this to be a collaborative process between, parents and the schools where, you want to make sure that these school rules that are set up are things that parents, I think, are comfortable with. Now, that being said, I think we all have to be aware of the fact that, for the most part, none of us as parents are specialists in the best way to, educate and teach our kids. Generally speaking, the people who work in schools, whether they're counselors, therapists, teachers, generally speaking, they've spent many years training to be teachers. They've generally keep up on education theory. I think we want to make sure as parents that we're listening heavily and intently to what the teachers are coming up with for how our kids should learn. But I do like that to be a collaborative process. Like we want to make sure that the material that's covered is something that parents are obviously comfortable with as well. I think that's reasonable.
Recently, the federal government sent a Dear Colleague letter warning that it would pull funding from schools that have diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. How do you see this affecting the district? And what, if anything, would you change in school district policy in response?
I think this is a really difficult question because if in fact the federal government was to fully pull federal funding from Oregon schools in general, the thing that is very challenging about that is there's not a mechanism we could likely pull to fill in that gap of funding, which means that, hey, our Oregon schools would be substantially underfunded to the level where, frankly, I don't know how we would, operate meaningfully without federal funding. It'd be extremely challenging if that was to be the case. As to what the state of Oregon should, do to comply with that particular regulation. Look, I'd be the first one to say it's getting outside of my wheelhouse as to whether it's something the state of Oregon can adequately comply with. But yeah, I would say if federal funding is going to disappear entirely from Oregon school districts, it would make things very challenging for Oregon schools to operate and educate its students effectively at all without that money. I really sincerely hope it does not come to that, is kind of what I would say.
What, if anything, should the school board or the city be doing to make it easier for teachers to live in Bandon?
Thanks. I think we're on a good path there at first. For those who are not aware of this, one of the things that our district is working on diligently is an affordable housing project. We're hoping it should be completed. I don't know when it would be, but there is an affordable housing project in the works within the city of Bandon that hopefully would provide several affordable housing units to city workers. Realistically, I think if we can expand that to have additional housing stock, whether it's apartments, homes, it's definitely something we should be looked at. I think one of the things that could be considered is there's a number of homes that sit vacant, within the city of Bandon itself, that are kind of part-time rentals. If there's a way to reduce the number of part-time rental units or make it otherwise unappealing to have a home sit vacant 300 days per year, I'd prefer us to have housing stock that actually goes to people who are going to live here year round, spend money here year round, and hopefully be teachers who are educating our students as well.
Right. Thank you. Would you like to make a closing statement?
I've really spent the entirety of my campaign talking about things that I feel are like core foundational issues for our students. Two of the key ones that I referred to a lot here are the importance of kids always having free lunch funding, regardless of what happens to school funding in the future. As well, making sure that we fully fund intervention teachers to make sure that our most vulnerable students get the guidance and additional assistance that they need to reach their full potential. And I think the other thing that I would say to all this is, I mentioned this point earlier, but the people who work at our schools, they're the people who know how to best teach our students in the most effective way
30
possible.
seconds.
As members of the school boards, I really do feel that our key role in all of this is giving those wonderful people the tools that they need to do their jobs and working in alignment to make sure that they're all going in the right direction. So I hope I have your vote on May 20th.
Thank you very much for joining us today. The League of Women Voters encourages all voters to check vote411.org to find more information about what's on their ballot. Good evening.